many of y'all have ever had to start over again completely? Right. For who was that very easy to do? It's never easy. Now, I have to say, for me, probably the hardest things that I ever had to do was to become an immigrant, to come to the US and to leave everything I knew back home to come over here. Now, for me to be able to explain to you why I think that was the hardest thing for me, I need to be able to tell you a little bit more about myself. Will that be fine with y'all if I do that? So I was born in 1981. I'm the youngest of 5 children. And I grew up on a small mining village in South Africa. My dad was a diesel mechanic, worked on the mine. My mother was a housewife. She raised all of us and tried to keep all of us in line. Now, as the youngest of 5, my brother was 13 years older than I was. And my youngest sibling closest to me is 4 years older than I was. So we were fairly separated. And so I grew up mostly by myself, stayed to myself, kept to myself. And I really grew up fairly shy because of that. I didn't make friends very easily, and I kind of just played in the eucalyptus forests around town, and that's how I kept myself busy. Schooling in South Africa is a little bit different than it is here, because South Africa doesn't get as cold as it does here. So most of our classrooms are open. Well, the classroom is not, but you're not inside a building the whole day. So when you move around, there the pathways leading to the different classes, all of that's outdoors. So we get a lot of outdoor time in South Africa, and you're only inside when you're literally in the classroom. Our education system is a lot more classical, where they focus a lot on handwriting, writing, reading, math, and science. Those are the 4 things that a lot of effort is being put into, and that's what they focus on a lot. And the main reason they do that is because South Africa does not have a very big varsity sporting system. So getting a scholarship to go to university with sport is not a big thing in South Africa. It does happen, there's a few things, but you have to get there based on educational merit. So if you don't do well in school, chances of getting a scholarship or even being allowed to go to a university is very hard to do. So throughout my years, I've learned that your parents do the best that they do based on what they know. But they cannot do more than what they know to do. So that's why the following generations, it's our responsibility to do better than our parents could, because we're supposed to know a little bit more. So they didn't know a lot about education and stuff like that because they didn't have any exposure to that. So they couldn't teach us about going to university. So our exposure was finishing school, getting a job, and that's how you continue from there on. And that's basically what I did. After I finished school, the town that I lived in had a big steel mill, and called Highveld Steel. And I applied to become an apprentice there, and I was lucky enough to get a position over there to become a boilermaker. Now, a boilermaker, basically, it's an old term. When it was created, we still made boilers, like on big steam locomotives, and when boilers were still used to heat buildings and stuff. But when I got my trade, it was basically just heavy metal fabrication. So I built a lot of rail cars, and I built the big steel ladles that they used in the steel fabrication. That's more what we did, and some heavy steel construction. So we did that. Becoming an artisan is basically a journeyman over here, and then after enough experience, you'll become a master. And I became a master doing that, and most of my experience was in the maintenance field of big steel mills. But my brother, being 13 years older than I was, he ended up going to the military straight after school. And because military service was still compulsory in South Africa at that time. When I finished school, it no longer was. So when I went, I volunteered to go to the military. But my brother served in the Air Force. And when I was still growing up, I got the opportunity to go to work with him and to see the planes and sit in the fighter planes. And I grew up when Top Gun just came out, so that was a big thing. And my passion, my dream was to become a fighter pilot, like I think many young boys that saw Top Gun wanted to do that. And at that stage, the South African Defence Force was still, we had the border war with Angola. So there still was an opportunity, but when I finished schooling, the war had ended over there, and really there was a lot of budget cuts, and I didn't know it at the time, but it would have been really hard for me to do. So when I qualified and I finished my apprenticeship and I got my qualification, I signed up to go to the Army. Now, the South African Defence Force has a centralized recruitment system. So you can't say you want to apply to go to the Navy or the Air Force. You basically apply, and you can give a preference, but whoever gets your application first, they're gonna have first choice. So I was drafted by the Ammunition Corps to become an ammunition specialist in the Army. And that's why I did my basic military training in the Army. And I'm kind of happy that that happened, because the basic training in the Army was a lot more extensive than it would have been in the Air Force. Because we did a lot of bush warfare, sleeping outside in the bush, learning how to camouflage, all of those things that I never would have gotten exposure to had I done my basic training in the Air Force. But after I finished my basic military training, I got a transfer to the Air Force to pursue my dream of becoming a pilot. And I worked as a radar operator and command post assistant. So I got to work with airplanes every single day, which made me happy. However, I was working underground, so I never got to see them other than on a radar screen. So it was kind of not what I wanted to do. So then I tried to push and to pursue my dream of becoming a pilot. But because of all the budget cuts and some political pressures and stuff, it would have just been almost impossible for me to do. So I kind of made the, if I can put it that way, the executive decision to go back to my trade and pursue my dream of getting a pilot's license at least, even though it wouldn't have been fighter pilot on my own. And that's what I did. I went back to my trade, worked as a boilermaker in a maintenance field, and saved up some money and ultimately got to do my private pilot's license on my own. Shortly after I got my pilot's license, I was on my way. I figured, okay, next step will then be to be a commercial pilot. And I was on my way to get my commercial pilot's license when we had our car wreck. In 2009, my lovely wife Sarah and I was in a very bad car wreck and a head-on collision. A drunk driver overtook another vehicle. I never saw it coming because there was a vehicle in front of us. And that vehicle just swerved out of the way and we hit head-on. And the vehicle that we had was the very first car that I bought when I was a first-year apprentice. Had no airbags, so we were really, really lucky to make it out alive. I was able to swerve just enough that most of the impact was on my side of the car. And as luck would have it, my arm went through the window and the other car hit me on the elbow and pushed me back into my seat. And because of that, my arm or my face went behind my arm, and so my face didn't hit the vehicle, and that probably is the only reason I survived. But it took a long recovery. I lost the use of my elbow. So luckily I've got the use of my hand, but I can no longer bend my elbow at all. So that was a new challenge to overcome. And in about 2004, when that was about 4 or 5 years before our car wreck, shortly after I came out of the military, I wouldn't say that I didn't like schooling, I did, but there were certain factors that I liked more than others. And reading was just never one of my big things. I never really liked reading much. And around 2004, I heard a quote from Mark Twain that said, "A man that chooses not to read has no advantage over someone that can't read." And that was really a wake-up call to me, because that made me understand that if I don't choose to read, then a person that cannot read I have no advantage over someone that can read. But it's my responsibility to take action and find and pursue the knowledge that I wished that I had. So I started reading some books and finding some books to read. Now, I think that these days they'll call it ADHD, but my mind wanders. When I start reading a book, I'll read something interesting, and then I get to the bottom of the page and I figured out I built a completely different story in my mind and I missed what I read on the page. So I had to go back and reread, so it took forever for me to read a book. And I think my biggest joy came when my wife introduced me to Audible, which is audiobooks. And that has really helped me so much, because I can be busy with something else and I can listen to the audiobooks. And that's really when I came over here working on the farm, being on a tractor the whole day, that has been my saving grace. Because last year I listened to 52 books. And the year before that I listened to 54 books. And if I had to sit and read, I can guarantee you that I wouldn't have even gotten close to that. Not even remotely. But so after the car wreck, shortly before the car wreck really, I had to go back a little bit. I made the choice that I wanted to do a little bit more than just be working with my hands all the time. So I found a position as an instructor, a Boilermaker instructor, and I applied for that position and I got the job. But literally the day before I was going to hand in my resignation, we had our car wreck. And I was off from work for 4 months because of the injuries that I sustained. And because that I lost the use of my elbow, the company that I was working for said that I was no longer medically fit to work as a Boilermaker in that position. And they were literally in the process of declaring me medically unfit to do the position, and then I would have been on medical disability from then on. But then a position opened up in the procurement department of that company, and I just grabbed it with both hands, and in a very short period of time I moved up to senior buyer, and I did imports and project procurement. But my passion for teaching sort of developed during that period, because after my car wreck, my brother-in-law also lost his job. He injured his back, and there was some other problems that happened at the company he worked for, and they ended up moving in with us to just get back on their feet. And he got involved with a company called Herbalife. And I don't know, have any of you heard of Herbalife? It's a network marketing company. And I took him to his meeting because he didn't have a vehicle. And at the meeting, I sort of liked what they were talking about, and I got involved with Herbalife as well. And during Herbalife, I think the thing that I enjoyed the most was going to the meetings and learning about the products and getting some business training, learning how to run a business, how to do certain things that I never got the exposure, because my parents never got exposure to that themselves. So that was really my first exposure to being able to run a business yourself. And I got involved with that, and I started to really understand the business model and understand the methods that they were using. And when I went to one training one morning, the person that was going to do the product training wasn't there that day. So they asked me if I would step up and do the training for them. And because I was still very shy at that stage, and I still am to a certain extent, I didn't really like to say no, because I don't like conflict. I never like conflict. So when somebody asks me something, my back gets upset with me a lot, because I will overload my back by just saying yes to everything somebody asks me. Not bad things, but good things. So when they asked me, I didn't like to say no, so I said yes. And very reluctantly, I guess that day I was so nervous I could feel my pants shaking on my leg. I was really nervous. But I think afterwards, when there was one specific gentleman that came up to me, and he was also in a maintenance field. And he came up to me and said that my story really resonated with him. And afterwards, when I did that a little bit more, I found that I really enjoyed the speaking aspect, the training aspect of it, and helping somebody to make a little bit more of themselves and to truly start to see their potential, like I was starting to see a little bit of my own potential. And with Jim Rohn, he used to be involved with Herbalife. I don't know if any of you have heard of Jim Rohn before. He was a very successful motivational speaker in the US, came from Idaho, ended up in Beverly Hills. And him and Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar was very about on the same level, if I can put it that way. They were some of the best. And I started to just consume everything I could get from him. And through that, I got involved with Zig Ziglar stuff. And in 2014, I got the opportunity to come to Dallas and be certified to become a Ziglar coach. And I was the first person in Africa to be certified to give Zig Ziglar's teachings. And that's mostly on goal setting, relationship building, and personal development. And those are the things that Zig in his days said that they discovered that those were the three aspects where people are most lacking, is building relationships that last, building self-confidence, and then having some goals and being able to set goals. So that's really a very open market, if you can put it that way, that you can go into and help people. So I really enjoyed being able to do that. And when I did get my certification in 2014, one of the gentlemen that I met at Ziegler Inc. was called Mike Rodriguez. And he was also a speaker that worked at Ziegler Inc. at that time, and he helped me to author my first books. Because I co-authored a book with him and some other authors around the world, and then that just gave me a step in the door for writing my next book, which was Breaking the Zone, which is telling a little bit about my life story, but also about how I overcame some of my challenges and how to get out of your comfort zone a little bit. And then after that, I wrote The Significance of Being Born, which I felt led to write that one because I truly believe that every life is valuable. And the significance of born basically is that it's about the importance of life and how I believe that the DNA of God is in every single one of us. And there is a purpose for every single one of our lives. And through all of that, I was involved with the Chamber of Commerce. I was an executive member of the Chamber of Commerce, and I was a mentor in the BNI chapter back there. So I became fairly well known in town, and I was working as a financial advisor at that time. After I went out of the procurement, I got involved with financial advice, and I was working as a financial advisor. But in end of 2018, I'd say we hit a couple of rough spots. The financial advice took a little bit of a slump. I had to pay back a bunch of commissions due to people that canceled policies prematurely, and because there was a bit of a recession. And I don't know why, but a lot of times the first thing that people let go is their life insurance, which is probably one of the most important things that they need, but that's the first thing they let go. Because of that, we had to sell some of our investments and really took a backslide, and that's how I ended up here, is to come and work. I could make more money working on a farm over here than I was making back in South Africa. And so I made the choice to come over here. It wasn't easy. My family, my wife, and my son Damien had to stay behind in South Africa while I came over here. So for the first 4 years, I was able to go back at the end of the year and come back over here. But literally for 9 to 10 months out of a year, I was in the US and they were in South Africa. And in 2022, June, they were able to join me permanently. And they've been here ever since. And we started the green card process before that in 2021. But it has just been absolute nightmare. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting. And we've done everything. We've done our medicals, we've done every single thing that we needed to do. But we're waiting for open visas, but yeah, we're being positive and hopeful, and that maybe we'll get it this year. But doing that, going from being fairly well known in town, being on the Chamber of Commerce and the committee, and best-selling author and speaker and all of that, and then having to work on a farm, that sort of gets you mentally, because literally the whole experience, my education, my childhood, growing up in a country, you're being trained for a system that you are no longer in. You no longer fit in that. Because coming to the US, the laws are different, the taxes are different, the banking system's different, how to set up a company is different. Everything that I knew was almost useless coming over here. So I had to learn everything from scratch. So that can have a little bit of a negative influence on your mentality and your mindset. So I've been struggling a little bit to get back to where I have been and to build my confidence back to that. But the good thing about being on the tractor was the ability to be able to absorb those books and read and constantly grow myself. And that's one thing that I truly believe, that you never stay the same, because there is no such thing as staying the same. Because the world will progress past you. So if you think you're staying the same, you're not. You're really backsliding, because the world will progress. regardless of if you're going to go with it or not. So you have to constantly keep growing, keep learning. And there's a nice quote that I like. It's really a Chinese proverb that says that you shouldn't confine your children to your level of schooling or education, because they were born into a different time. So in order for us to give the most for our children, we should teach them more than we were able to learn ourselves. So I got involved with that, and I did a lot to educate myself and to build my confidence again. And through that, oh, you're fine. I think through that, one quote that resonated with me as well was Dennis Waitley used to say, and he was also, Dennis Waitley, I don't know if any of you have heard who Dennis Waitley is. Nobody? No, Dennis Waitley used to be the psychological coach for the United States Olympic team. And he is one of the, if I can almost put it that way, founding fathers of modern day psychology, if I can really put it, especially sports psychology. And he used to say that his first book, The Psychology of Winning, which was a multi-bestseller, New York Times bestseller, and it sold millions of copies, laid in his desk drawer for 10 years before he finally built up the courage to publish it. And he'd like to say that it's not because the book wasn't any good, but it's because his heart wasn't there, his mind wasn't there yet. So that always resonates with me, and say, because of a lot of challenges that I've gone through, I think for a long time I've been struggling with that as well, thinking, okay, but do I really have something to offer? Is the information and the knowledge that we have to give really worthwhile, and are people wanting to hear it? So that helped me to get to that point where I could say, okay, hey, maybe what I have to say is not for everybody, and I know that, and I understand that. But there might be one person that needs to hear my message, and I might change their entire lives. And I think all of us need to know that, is that somewhere in the world there's somebody looking up to us as an example, as a mentor. And for that one person, we can make a massive difference. And for that reason, I think it's our responsibility to better ourselves every day, so that we can be an example for those out there, that they can be better, become a better version of themselves. There's also a quote that's being passed out a lot that says knowledge is power. But I've also learned that knowledge is not power. Because in the first few years of my education, or self-education, post-schooling, I learned a lot of stuff, but I applied none of it. And if you don't apply what you learn, it's really useless. It's fluff. So I like to alter that a little bit and say applied knowledge is powerful, because you need to learn to apply what you learn. That leads to growth and expansion. So another quote I saw last night was one from Benjamin Franklin that said, an investment in education pays the highest interest. And I've learned that, I've seen that, and I believe that you have, being retired teachers throughout your careers, you've seen how education can truly change somebody's life. Just a little bit of input that you can give them to believe in themselves, build that character, can absolutely make or break somebody's trajectory. So to close, I'd just like to leave you with this one quote from Mahatma Gandhi that says, live like you were to die tomorrow, but learn like you're going to live forever. Because your knowledge, if you keep on learning, you can keep applying that. But more than that even, what you know and what you teach to others is part of your legacy. It's part of what you leave behind. Because unfortunately my dad passed away, both my parents passed away, but when my dad passed away, he had a vast amount of knowledge and experience, especially about vehicles, diesel mechanic stuff. And that's the aspect that I never got to really explore. So he took all of that knowledge and information information with him to the grave. So the graveyard is one of the most valuable places where all the millions and millions of knowledge and experience is buried with the people. So as long as you can, as long as you have the ability, please share what you have, please share your information, your knowledge with the next generation, so that we can then take it and apply it and grow on that. And through that, we can all somewhat live forever. Thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask?
Yeah, any questions about South Africa or?
Is that your dominant arm that got hurt?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I am right-handed. So probably the biggest challenges was the small things, like washing your face with both hands, brushing your teeth. Those were the small things. Eating a hamburger with two hands. The little things is what gets you. But yeah, you get used to it. I'm very blessed that initially when my arm was in a cast, it was 90 degrees. Then I got infection in the elbow and I got allergic to the cast and I had to take all of that off. And I broke it. It was almost fused and I fell and I broke it again. And then I was allergic to the cast. I couldn't put that on. I couldn't put a sling on, so I left it just hanging until it grew back to where it is right now, which is a really comfortable position. So through all of that going wrong, God knows what He's doing, and just trusting Him. The saying that says hindsight's 20/20. Looking back, you can see God's hand in everything. And I am not for one moment sad about what happened to me. What I am sad about is that the gentleman that hit us paid with his life. And he was a drunk driver. Some people take that very badly, but you know what? He's just a human being, made a mistake. And so I'm not mad at him. I'm not mad at anybody else. It's been a challenge, but through that we learn, we grow, we get better. And I think we get out stronger on the other side.
How did you land in Bootheel, Missouri?
Well, that's quite interesting. I ended up working when the financial industry took a little bit of a knock. I decided to go back to my trade, so I found an interim job at a hydraulic company, and they built some stuff, building some small structures. So I worked as a boilermaker over there, and one of the guys that was working there had his brother-in-law was working for a farmer here in just on the other side of Paragould for the Brady's, and he heard of a position which was obviously at Tommy, who I'm working for right now as well, and that's how they put me in contact with Tommy, and we started speaking on WhatsApp, which is just an app that you communicate with. And yeah, he said if I wanted the job, it's mine, and literally got on a plane and came over here. It's hard, you know, if you come over here, you don't know the person. You've literally only spoken to them on WhatsApp or Messenger, and then having to come over here, not knowing anybody. Now I've been in the US in 2014 when we came over here, so at least I knew a little bit what to expect. But yeah, it was quite a challenge, especially the heat.
Is your relatives still all of them over in South Africa? Do you have anybody in the United States?
Yes, we are the first ones in the US. I have 3 sisters left. My brother passed away not last year, I think the year before, which was also hard because I couldn't go back for his funeral. So yeah, it's tough. But all my sisters are there. They all still stay in the same hometown that we grew up in. Or not really, we grew up on the mining village, but all of us then moved to the town, which was closer, and they all still stay in that town. We do keep contact. Luckily, you know, technology has made the world a little bit smaller, so we can keep contact with video calling and stuff like that. But we were the first ones, I think. Initially, I didn't think so, but I think now I can say it, brave enough to become immigrants. Because boy, it takes a lot of courage to decide to go to another country where you don't know if you're going to be welcomed or not, if people are going to accept you or not. Like I said, you have to learn everything from start. And it's a challenge. But one thing I can say that my dad has instilled in me is a good work ethic. And I always believe that no matter where you go, your work will speak for itself. And if you're a hard worker and you know what you're doing, people will respect you for that. And I think that has helped me a lot, and it's opened up a lot of doors for me as well.
Are your books like on Amazon? Or?
Yes, ma'am. They're available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, basically any online platform you can get them.
What all is involved in getting a green card? You know, we hear about it all the time.
Yeah.
But what all is involved? You know, what is the reason for a delay, such as your experience now?
Well, the first process you have to do if you want to come over here legally on a green card, you have to find an employer that is willing to sponsor you, that have an open position, that they can prove, because they have to be able to prove that they cannot find skilled labor in the US that can do that position. So they have to advertise the role. The Department of Labor will give a role description of what they need to do, what exactly the job prescription is, what the salary will be, everything. And they have to advertise in specific areas to see if anybody from the area or in the US will apply for that position. Only if they do not get anybody to apply for that position will they then get approval to find a foreign worker. Then, depending on your skill level, and I think part of our delay is because I'm in farm work right now, we are considered as unskilled labor. Even though my experience, my past, I've got a lot of skills and qualification, but they still see me because it's farm work. They still see me as an unskilled worker, the position that I applied for. So in that role, there's only 10,000 visas being issued every year. And if the visas are done, then you have to wait until the next year. And I think that's partly, and I don't know if any of the illegal immigrants has taken some of those. I don't know that. I cannot say that with any confidence. But what we have seen is that in the last 3 years, there has really been a backlog. Because before the last 3 years, it's been current. There was no backlog. But currently there is quite a big backlog. And only once you go through that entire process, and then you have to do your medical checkups, they check you, you have to get vaccinated and everything. So it's quite a process. They check your qualifications, and only after that, then you can go for an interview. And after the interview, which we have not done yet, that's the last stage. So after the interview, if they say, okay, you're not a threat to the US, and you will actually be a benefit to the country, then you can get your green card. Now, some people do it the other way, where they will marry a US citizen. You can get it a lot faster that way. But I did not want to go that route. Any other questions?
How long can you stay in the USA without your green card?
If you come in on a visitor's visa, because you can apply for a visitor's visa, that is usually, if it is approved, it's valid for 10 years, and you can come to the US for 6 months at a time. Now, on a visitor's visa, you're allowed to come for vacation, a little bit of business, but you're not allowed to earn any income. Unless you have a company over here, you can work in the company, but you yourself cannot earn any income. So if you want to come work here, that's really not an option. So what some people do, they come over here and they come and look for a company that's willing to give them a job, even though technically that is not legal. They don't want you to do that. So then you're allowed to stay up to 6 months. On an H-2A visa, which is an agricultural seasonal visa, then you are allowed to stay in the country as long as the season is, which is usually 9 to 10 months. So you can come, the earliest most people are able to come over here is the beginning or middle of February, and then they'll stay until the end of November. So for the entire planting season, summer, and then the harvest season. You can do that and then get a transfer, but over the winter period you can get a transfer to work for a different entity, a different farmer, over the winter period if there's somebody that has cows or that have work throughout the year. And you can stay up to a maximum of 3 years, but then you have to leave the country for at least 3 months. And obviously if you didn't have a work visa, then you can stay as long as your visa is, your work permit. They call it a employment authorization document. And that is usually about 2 years that work authorization document is valid before you can have to leave, and before it ends you can renew it, and you can stay indefinitely until you can get a green card. But you have to stay legal, and it's expensive. You know, it costs a bunch of money to submit every time there's a change, or like when your work authorization gets cancelled or expires, you have to renew it, and you have to pay the fees every time again. If you work through an attorney, then they charge a whole bunch of money extra. And you can do everything by yourself, but if you miss one little thing, then you'll get rejected. And I think that's why a lot of people work through attorneys, even though it's a lot more expensive.
Well, is that true also for women? What
Yeah.
you're going
Their applications are tied to mine.
through? Okay.
So because I'm the only one working, their applications were tied to mine. So as long as one person has a offer of employment and can work, then they can also get green cards. And they both, even though he's not old enough to work yet, but they do both have work authorization documents. So they can legally work, and they are free to work anywhere. Where my work authorization is tied to my employer until I get my green card. And 6 months after that, then I can go and work wherever I choose. But for now, I'm tied to agriculture.
You like being over here?
I do. The summers are rough. I have to say, working outside in the heat is a challenge with the deer flies and the mosquitoes. But I do enjoy it. It's very beautiful. I like the clean air. The people, for the largest extent, are very kind and nice people. There's a few oddballs, which I know all of you know as well. That you
Is our food any different from yours, South Africa?
Yeah, I think the food is good over here, but we were raised with a very diverse palate, if I can put it that way, because South Africa is not called the Rainbow Nation for no reason. You know, there's vast amount. We've got 11 official languages, which are like Spanish and English here, but there we have 11. That is considered, that's official. And there's a lot of people that speak those languages.
So you speak another language?
I speak 3. I'm fluent in English and Afrikaans, which is our home language. And then I speak I'd say I speak enough Spanish to be able to help myself, and a little bit of French. But yeah, it's the food over here is, like I said, is good. But there we have like Indians. There's a lot of Indian influence over there. A lot of the African tribes. Then our descendants are Dutch, so we have a lot of Dutch influence. French. There's a lot of French that settled there. So there's a little bit of everything. So for the food you find in France, you'll find a lot of that in South Africa. Food you find in India, you'll find in South Africa. Curries and stuff like that. So there's a lot of interesting stuff over there. Good food and a lot of beautiful wildlife as well.
You talk about the weather in America. What is the weather like in South Africa?
Well, it depends on where you settle in South Africa, because there's places that's really, really hot. That's like almost like desert, very dry. And then there's rainforesty areas. Where we were at, it was very, very mild. Summers, we'd get up like maybe high 90s at most. I don't think we ever broke 100. And in the winter, the days would be like in the 60s, and then it would drop down at night. It would drop down maybe close to 0, close to freezing. But otherwise, it was lovely. It's beautiful, beautiful country, beautiful nature, lovely weather. The bad thing about it is corruption, crime has gotten really bad. That's main reason why a lot of people is over here. It's become exceedingly hard to find work, good jobs, and then safety, the safety of yourself and your family. I was almost hijacked twice, armed hijacking twice. They tried to push me off the road once with a vehicle, run up the road, and they had broken into our house twice, armed robbers as well. So there's a lot of reasons why people are over here, but that doesn't take anything away from the country. It's a beautiful country. Most of the people over there are wonderful, wonderful people. It's just crime and corruption has ruined it. Yeah. Luckily, there's still some people willing to fight for it. Any other questions? Good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, do you like a car?
I do not have it with
What did
me.
you say your last name was now?
I will say it how we say it, and then I'll say it how most of the Americans say it. Is that okay? Okay. We say Pieter van der Westhuizen.
What do you think?
Now, most of the Americans will say Peter, and that's fine because I spell my name a little bit differently. It's spelled P-I-E-T-E-R, but it's just Peter, spelled the Dutch way. But my last name is Van der Westhuizen. That's how. Van der Westhuizen. So most people over here will say Van der Westhuizen, and it's pretty close.
The
But
direct translation for it is of the West House.
yeah, if you directly translate it to from Dutch, it means from the West House.
Okay, so how you spell it?
Look him up on Amazon, don't type in P-E-T-E-R, Vander whatever, because it brings up this Olympian guy.
Yeah, there's also another Peter van der Westhuizen. Can I help you?
P-I-E-T-E-R.
Yeah.
Oh,
Slide the hand. Sure, yes.
yeah, even though we're retired, we still might want to retire. We want to make sure you wrote it in English.
Well, at Thanksgiving, it was our turn to go to Gary's side of the family, my husband. And so Tommy and Terry were there, the farmers, and so Peter and his wife and children, they were there. So it was very interesting at lunch that day to hear everything. And so the other day I was thinking, we've got to have a speaker. We've got to have a speaker. Who can I get? And Peter. So I called Becky or text Becky, Tommy's wife, and talked to her. And she said, oh yeah, that'd be right down his alley, you know. And she hadn't even asked him. But so she gave me his information, and we've been texting. So yeah. So all right, everybody eat up, and then we'll have our business meeting afterwards.